The standard route to the NFL looks something like this. You grow up playing football. You excel in high school enough to earn a scholarship. Then you go play a few years in college while you physically mature. And finally, NFL organizations are impressed enough with your resume that you're either drafted or signed as an undrafted free agent. However, according to Pro Football Reference, 469 NFL players completely skipped step 3. In fact, some skipped the first 3 steps altogether. Now, the vast majority of these 469 men are from about 100 years ago, when guys had names like Ted Lone Wolf, Dilly Dally, and the best name I've ever seen in my life, Dick Deerslayer. To move past guys like this, today's video's focus is more on the modern era, and on positions other than kickers and punters. We have 9 dudes whose stories stand out enough to focus on, due to their unique and unbelievable paths to the NFL. So with that, why don't we go ahead and dive in? In recent history, the NFL has made an attempt to attract more non-American and Canadian talent through the International Player Pathway Program, which allows players under the age of 24 with no college experience to participate. Since 2016, there has been 39 players from this program that have signed with NFL teams. The 2 most notable are Efe Obada and Jordan Mailata. After surviving a tragic childhood of trafficking, homelessness, and many foster homes.
Growing in foster care, just the instability, I feel like it translates in terms of being in the NFL.
Efe Obada grew to a massive 6'6" and well over 200 pounds. At the age of 20, a friend recommended that he should try out for an American football team in London. Despite not knowing a single thing about football, Obada agreed, and eventually he signed and played for the London Warriors. His immense size and athleticism was extremely impressive, and after just 5 games, Obada had received interest from the NFL as a defensive end. After an initial tryout with the Cowboys, Obada spent 2 years on practice squads around the league. Following a strong preseason with the Carolina Panthers, Obada became the first player from the International Player Pathway Program to make a final roster. And in his first ever NFL game, he balled out.
From behind, hit by Obada.
Being named NFL Defensive Player of the Week.
And it's bombed. And was it caught? It might have been. Obada, did he scoop it? Yes, he did!
As of today, Efe Obada has been in the NFL for 7 years and is making an impact for the Washington Commanders as a role player. Looking at the other player I mentioned, the Australian-born Jordan Mailata got to the NFL through a similar path. As the son of Samoan immigrants, Mailata grew up playing rugby. And due to his eye-popping 6'8" and 300+ pound frame, it didn't take long for NFL executives to get a hold of him after they saw his tape. These highlights are just insane. In January 2018, at the age of 20, Mailata was invited to train at IMG Academy in Florida. And in just 2 months of training, Mailata put together a very impressive pro day, which got him selected in the 7th round of the NFL draft.
The Philadelphia Eagles select Jordan Mailata, tackle, Sydney, Australia.
Following 2 frustrating years of technique training and injuries, it all began to come together for Mailata in 2020, when he made his first in-game appearance. 3 years later, Mailata has developed into a cornerstone left tackle for the Eagles. He signed a $64 million extension with $40 million guaranteed. Along with playing in the Super Bowl last year, he was named a Pro Bowl alternate. Now, there was another non-American who had dreams of playing in the NFL, and he became the biggest storyline of the 2015 preseason. In the spring of 2015, the 49ers signed Jared Hayne, a rugby star, to a 3-year deal. His rugby highlights were recognized by NFL players like Reggie Bush, who believed he could play in the league. The positions Haynes was to compete for were running back, return man, and other special teams positions. After the most hyped preseason of any player that year,
here's Jared Hayne. How about that catch?
Hayne made the 53-man roster entering the regular season. His first game would be played in front of a national audience on Monday Night Football. But this is what happened on his first punt return.
For the Niners, diving and catching and fumbling. Oh, Jared Hayne, the thing that everybody said about him because of his rugby background, is so comfortable catching the punt.
Overall, Hayne made a few plays here and there, but was waived midway through the season. He then retired from the NFL, later stating that he was going to try and make the 2016 Olympics, and he also didn't want to learn a new playbook after the 49ers hired Chip Kelly. Unfortunately, Haynes' legacy has been tarnished with a string of sexual assault allegations and convictions. On May 12, 2023, Haynes was sentenced to 4 years and 9 months in prison. On the opposite side of that last issue, Brian Banks was a high school football star that had signed with USC during his junior year and seemed to be destined for the NFL. But that all changed, however, when at the age of 16, Banks was falsely accused of rape by a classmate, and he wrongfully spent 5 years in prison. 9 years after being convicted, Banks had met up with his accuser, who admitted in the presence of a private investigator Banks had hired that she had fabricated the story. This was the first critical step in Banks getting help from the CIP to get a judge to reverse his conviction and relief of his record as a sex offender.
He's a strong young man with an amazing future, and we want to get him back on track.
But the damage was done. As far as football was concerned, Banks was a decade removed from playing. But with the reversed conviction, Banks' name began popping up on some NFL radars, and he even got a tryout with several teams in the summer of 2012. This included a chance from Pete Carroll, who had been the coach that recruited him at USC.
I answered the phone and it was Pete Carroll asking if I knew any linebackers. He was looking for a linebacker.
Ultimately, after playing in the smaller UFL, Banks signed with the Falcons on April 3rd, 2013, participating in off-season workouts, OTAs, and training camp. He stayed with the team long enough to participate in preseason games, but he was released before the regular season. Despite not making the regular season roster, his story of fighting to make it to the NFL after everything that happened was an amazing inspiration. After his time in Atlanta, Banks was hired to join the NFL Department of Operations, and his life was made into a movie that was released in the US back in 2019. In high school, Robert Chancey was a standout football and baseball player. In football, he was the number 2 ranked running back in the nation, but he chose to pursue baseball, skipping out on college entirely, and he was selected in the 6th round of the 1992 MLB draft by the Baltimore Orioles. Then, after 5 tough years in the minors, Chancey needed to find a new career path. As a talented athlete who stood at 6 feet, 250 pounds, he still had football aspirations on his mind, despite not playing in many years. After an unsuccessful tryout for the Canadian Football League, Chancey's younger cousin Antoine Smith was participating in his college pro day in preparation for the NFL draft, and he allowed his cousin to join in. To the surprise of scouts, the 6-foot, 250-pound Chancey dropped a nasty 4.5 40-yard dash time, which immediately garnered the attention of the Chargers staff, and they proceeded to sign Robert Chancey to their roster as a practice squad player. In his first year with the team, the Chargers promoted him to the game day roster as a fullback, and he made an appearance in 6 games as a rookie. Overall, Chancey managed to last 4 years in the NFL, moving to a new team every single year. He was mostly a special teams guy, but he did get a few starts over those seasons and managed to score 4 career touchdowns.
Chancey breaks it back, touchdown!
He also trucked the hardest hitting safety in the league.
And here's Chancey, bang. Ooh, Sharper felt that little dope, didn't he?
Chancey picked that one.
Taking it back many years, Otis Sistrunk and Gene Lipscomb were both big dudes with crazy athletic potential, but each decided to go into the Marines straight out of high school. Also, just throwing this in, they were pro wrestlers for a brief time. But anyways, focusing on Sistrunk first, in the early 1960s, he had a brief career in the military before leaving the Marines at 21. While working at a meat packing plant, he decided to play semi-pro ball. After a few years, Sistrunk was spotted by an LA Rams scout in 1971.
But it just so happened I was in the right place and the right time. This God was on my side.
And started practicing with them as a defensive lineman. During a practice, reps from the Raiders were impressed with him enough to actually sign him to their roster in 1972. From there, Sistrunk became a full-time starter for 7 seasons, making a huge impact for them during the 70s. Famously, during a Monday Night Football game, a camera got a shot of him on the sidelines with his bald head steaming. Because the Raiders listed his college as the US Mars, which was short for United States Marine Corps, the commentator said live,
"This is Otis Sistrunk from the University of Mars." He's the scariest guy I've ever seen in my life.
The nickname, the Man from Mars, was forever associated with him. The other guy I mentioned, Gene Lipscomb, also received a nickname, Big Daddy. While stationed as a Marine, Big Daddy played football in his spare time and dominated. At 6'6" and nearly 300 pounds, the stories of this guy at Camp Pendleton became the stuff of legend. He was so impressive as an athlete that the Rams' public relations director and future NFL commissioner Pete Rozelle scouted Lipscomb at Camp Pendleton, became impressed with his upside, and eventually offered him a pro football contract. Lipscomb spent 3 years with the Rams as a part-time starter.
He caught me, he fell on top of me, he covered over. The rest of the defensive players jumped on him, there were about 5 of them at that time. The whistle blew. Everybody got up. Big Daddy picked me up and says, "You all right, Sweet Pea?"
But things really took off once he signed with the Colts. During his time with them, Lipscomb helped the team win 2 NFL championships as one of their best players. Sadly, while in the midst of his playing career, Lipscomb passed away from a heroin overdose at the age of 31.
It just was beyond comprehension that Eugene Big Daddy Lipscomb, as huge as he was, who loved life as much as he did, could have come to that kind of an ending.
Coming from New York, Ray Seals was a defensive line prospect in high school that was being recruited to play at Alabama. But after going on a visit without his high school coach's permission, everything changed. His coach got pissed off, Seals gave up football altogether, and after high school, skipped out on college and moved to Florida. Later on, however, he started second-guessing his decision to quit football. So Seals returned back home and took up semi-pro ball. At 6'3", 290, he knew he had NFL potential. After the 1982 strike, he began calling NFL teams asking for a tryout, and only one guy listened to him, Ray Perkins. Perkins was the head coach at Tampa Bay, but before that, he had tried to recruit Ray Seals when he was Alabama's head coach. Perkins ended up bringing him in for a workout, was immediately impressed, and signed Seals to a contract. Over the course of 8 total years in the NFL, Seals worked his way up from essentially a camp body to a full-time starter.
Big Ray Seals grabbed him.
The peak of his career was actually quite impressive as he compiled 24 sacks over a 3-season stretch.
Kramer, down he goes, and that will be a sack, the first today. Ray Seals, I mean, they sent everybody.
Alright, now for the final player in this video, we have the Beer Man, Michael Lewis. After quitting football as a freshman in high school due to his family needing him to get a job, Lewis became career-oriented. And after becoming a father as a senior in high school, Lewis passed on college and continued to work after he graduated. In his early 20s, Lewis was a Budweiser truck driver in the New Orleans area. Also at that point, he decided to play some flag football in his spare time and became somewhat of a local legend. He decided to pursue this football route further, going from amateur flag football through various semi-pro leagues, and finally reached arena football.
Then hits Michael Lewis for the touchdown, and the Beast go up with a score of 7-0.
Here, Lewis amassed very impressive numbers, which resulted in him getting invited to NFL training camps. After a failed tryout with the Eagles, Lewis returned home to New Orleans and was planning on resuming his job as a beer truck driver. But then, the Saints gave him a call, and he would end up making their roster in 2001, making him a 30-year-old rookie. Amazingly, this local beer truck driver became a sensation in 2002. In just his second season, Lewis earned first-team All-Pro honors as a returner, taking 3 kicks to the house. His journey would last 7 years in the league as a return man and a part-time receiver, before retiring from the NFL. As of 2019, it was announced that a biopic about his life was being produced.
This is Lewis. Look at that hole right there. My